Hello and welcome back to Around the Horns. This is Zachary Symm with Orangebloods, and I have a special guest this week. Travis Galey is here in lieu of my normal colleague, who's on his honeymoon down in Mexico. I haven't seen any, crazy photos of margaritas and tequila shots, but I did get proof of life, so he is alive and well after the wedding. But Travis, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, and you will also not find any crazy photos of margaritas with me, but other than that, I'm doing well.
Yeah, well, the Occupy Left Field boys, they had their fill of fireball shots during the Texas Regional this past weekend. So I'm sure they're gearing up for a fun regional at the Jungle as Texas is headed out to Greenville, North Carolina to take on East Carolina. But before we jump in all of that, what did you think about the regional where obviously Texas kind of swept through? They didn't really experience too much stress and, trouble, but what are your thoughts?
That was exactly my thought. It was striking to me how little stress and troubles there were in the regional. It was a regional that we would have expected at the beginning of the season, and then all of that kind of got scrapped in March and April and May. But it was nice to see that that's how, at the end of the day, they played. So yeah, it was a good thing to see.
Yeah, for sure. I think the best thing was that and Pierce touched on this in the post game after they won it against Air Force, but not many teams get the ability to kind of use a regional as a bullpen building exercise, and that's exactly what he treated it as. That Sunday game against Air Force, he decided to go just like he did in the Big 12 tournament. Let's go bullpen. You get 2 innings or 3 innings. You get 3 innings, and just hand off to the next guy. And he did mix it up. He brought in power arm, Jared Southard in between Staley and Duplantier. And then he got LeBaron Johnson a little bit of work, but Staley ran into trouble a couple times. But I think the best thing that I saw from him is he kept his composure. He took a moment to breathe off the mound, and he didn't give up any runs. He trusted his defense, and so that was really good to see. Southard was probably the best I've seen him in quite some time. He struck out 6 in 3 innings and walked 1 and gave up 1 hit. But I mean, he looked really good, and that's huge because he's a guy that sits 95, 98, and Texas is absolutely going to need that kind of arm going into the Super Regional this weekend. And then, if they were to make it to Omaha. So,
I wrote in my column on Orangebloods today, this was the regional was the first game where the bullpen really established itself. They looked good all weekend. They, especially the Sunday game, like we're talking about, whether it was a bullpen game. And for an area of the team that's been a problem all year, it was kind of good to see them come out and just show out, if you will. Jared Southard, I agree with you. He looked the best. I thought he was really, really sharp. They didn't have to run Zane Morehouse out, so he should be fresh coming into this weekend. It was a nice outing for this bullpen, which has been very maligned this year.
Yeah, and it was interesting talking to Pierce before the game or before the series and then after the series, what were his thoughts on the bullpen? And, he said, we're going to go with the guys that we think have the best mentality and matchups at that time. And so, we didn't see Harrison over the weekend. We only saw Tristan once. We didn't see Morehouse. So, there's a lot of guys that were able to get some rest in and kind of relax. I'd say the other good news is that Hodo came out of it relatively fine and unscathed too much. He's got a little fracture in the face, but he was able to come back, and then Texas obviously did well in that Sunday game, and he was able to get some rest in the back half, which is huge. So it'll be, I think all games are good for this weekend. No one's going to be hurting too much, and I think everyone's going to feel pretty fresh. DC obviously continues to give Coach Pierce some lineup conundrums, and knowing that we're going to go against a left-hander in Mayhew against East Carolina on Friday night, or I guess I keep saying Friday night, but it's Friday during the day.
Yeah, not a lot of work's going to get done Friday.
I fully expect him to sit EK and bring in DC. So he's going to go that matchup. But yeah, it's it seems like a different guy each day came through, which was really good to see as well. So,
well, let's talk about the super regional matchup against East Carolina. What do you think of Connor Jordan Mayhew, or CJ as he likes to be called?
He's an undersized guy. He reminds me somewhat of Pete Hansen or Lucas Gordon in some aspects. I don't think he's obviously as good. his natural tendency and role is as a closer. He doesn't really go deep in games. There's been a number of starts he's made where he goes 2-3 innings and he hands it off.
Yeah. He's had one game, by the way, where he actually threw a 9-inning no-hitter against Memphis back on May 6th.
Yeah.
And still didn't get the win because they had to go 14 innings. So that's kind of bad luck for him. But you're right. Most of the games he's been 3, 4, 5, 6 innings as a starter, and then he's out.
Yeah. And that's, talking to Coach Godwin for ECU earlier today, that's been their philosophy all year long, because Mayhew did start the season out as a closer. And he said that there's no defined roles on anyone. He said, we don't have a starter. We don't have a closer. We have a staff. And he said, we'll go however we feel. You may see the Saturday starter come in relief in the 4th inning on Friday. You may see their closer come in the 2nd inning. Like, it's just complete madness. Like, I was trying to chart their pitchers and I'm like, I give up with these guys. Is
that a philosophy that can go the distance?
I think it depends on how they perform. It's really hard to get into a rhythm against a guy, especially if someone like Mayhew has a little bit of a different and unique arm slot. He's more of a deception pitcher. He's not really going to overpower you. But if you can bump him for 3-4 innings and you bring in a guy like Carter Spivey or Ryder Giles or one of the other, like, more power arms, typical power arms, that really can affect a lineup and kind of keep you off balance. And so if they're able to keep Texas off balance long enough to keep them in the game, yeah, I mean, it absolutely can be effective, because we've seen Texas do the same thing. But, if just one of those guys has to have a bad inning and all of a sudden you're in a lot of trouble. So
yeah.
It really is a kind of a do or die situation. But Godwin said, like, we started 14-13 on the year. We've been in playoff mode since 28th game of the season. That's a lot of stress. That's a lot of pressure. So It'll be interesting to see, because as well as they did in the regional, they did get battered around by Coastal Carolina on that Saturday game. They got beat 9-1. And so I think if Texas can put the screws to them, it becomes a little bit different situation. So
you talked about East Carolina. They did start the season rough. And to their credit, they played a lot of good teams. They played a lot of teams that were in the regionals, a few who even advanced in the regionals to the supers. But they didn't fare so well against them. They were like 4-8 against top 50 RPI teams.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this earlier, and I wanted to get your opinion. If this was a Big 12 team, where would they be in the Big 12 conference?
This team, when I started looking into them, and you break down their offense, you break down how they run their offense, you break down what they like to do in their pitching. I think they have some good pitching pieces. Not having a dedicated starter to roll out there and know that he's going to go 7 innings, that would be really tough in a grinding out Big 12 schedule. Texas saw the same thing. You don't have a number 3 starter, you're going to be in trouble. But honestly, I see a lot of similarities to maybe like a team like West Virginia. You've got some really good guys. They can grind it out. They're athletic. They're not afraid to put
They're going to run the bases.
They're going to get on the bases. But I like their pitching better than West Virginia. So I kind of see them as like that 5-6, somewhere right in there. So it is a unique matchup. They don't draw a lot of walks, which I thought was interesting. They don't strike out a ton at the same time. But then their on-base percentage isn't that great, because they are laying down a lot of sack bunts and they are doing a lot of hit and run and slashes and all that. So they're probably better than their numbers suggest, but I don't think they're an elite offense by any stretch of the means. I think it's someone that Hansen and Gordon should be able to handle on a 6 to 7 inning basis. So
yeah, their offense certainly statistically leaves a lot to be desired. They've got 4 guys hitting around 325, one who's up at like 343, and they only have two real power batters. Bryson Worrell is probably their best hitter, period.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Cowart Jenkins, he's got a few pops. He's got 12 on the year, and he's batting 326. Outside of that, is there anyone on this team that scares you?
I think Pierce will tell you that you just cannot let Bryson Worrell, their center fielder, beat you. Their left fielder, Lane Hoover, as you mentioned, he's hitting 343 on the year, but he doesn't have any home runs. He's a pure slash hitter. The true freshman that you mentioned hitting 326, Jenkins Cowart, he's had a really nice freshman season, but he's come on more on late. Like, he hasn't been doing that all year long. So you kind of wonder, like, if he's going to hit that kind of barrier once the pressure gets ratcheted up of a senior or as a super regional. And then the two-way player, Zach Agnos, he's solid. He's got a couple of home runs, but again, he's much more of a gap to gap hitter. He's not, you don't expect him to go deep. Right. And so, no, I don't, outside of Worrell, I don't think there's anyone that really scares you on that lineup. The interesting thing was, if you look at their batting against some of the top pitchers they face, even though they are typically midweek games, they haven't looked that great, but they've done enough to win. And so it really is a grinded out multiple offense. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, but the thing that stood out to me is their fielding percentage is 983. Sure. Texas cannot go in expecting an error in the first to help plate them 2 runs, or an error in the third to like plate 5 runs. Like that's not going to happen. They're not going to
get free bases.
You're not going to get free bases by these guys. And I was looking at their strikeouts, and their pitchers do a good job of striking hitters out. And so they're actually in the top 20 or 15 in the nation in strikeout to ball ratio, and then strikeout per 9 innings. So yeah, they're a solid pitching club that relies on pitching and defense. Not too dissimilar from Texas in some ways, although Texas obviously has Ivan Melendez and Murphy Staley and a couple of guys that really do have the ability. Yeah, even Faltini. So
up and down the lineup, Texas has bats that can put it out
on any given night. Yeah, I think the issue that Texas has had at times is it's only been 1 or 2 guys that have been on that night. But when they're all on, this would not be a close matchup at all. Yeah.
Yeah, the more I keep looking at this, though, the more this feels like it's going to come down to if Pete Hansen is on and if Lucas Gordon is on, and if those 2 guys are if they have their stuff. I don't know, maybe calling me crazy, but I'm not seeing in much. If those 2 guys are on, I don't see how East Carolina wins this. Is that a stretch?
No, not at all. I think the most important thing, though, for Texas is Texas has to win game 1. You win game 1 with Hansen, you now have so much more leeway to just move things around and really go matchup to matchup. The other thing is, you look at offenses per game, Texas is at number 2 in the nation, or number 3 in the nation at almost 10 runs a game. And ECU's just barely scraping 7 runs. And so, if it does get down to it, I think Texas can just purely outslug them as well. They didn't need to, but I mean, they dropped an 11 spot and a 10 spot against Air Force, and Paul Skeens is a future first-round draft pick. So,
future Longhorn?
Sources say that he is very likely to be one. So
yeah,
I think that'll be interesting, something to watch, because he's going to have a lot of suitors. But yeah, I think there's a very good possibility that he could be.
Yeah, didn't mean to get us off topic there, but it is definitely interesting if you look at who his Twitter followers are now. There's more than a few Longhorn staff people in there,
and he was hanging out around the game during La Tech, Texas as well. So
yeah.
Take that for what
we'll get into that discussion another day. There's more to come. But let me ask you this then. Look, East Carolina, they've lost in the super regionals 3 of the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. They've been to the super 6 times, have never won, but to their credit, they've never hosted. This is the first time they're hosting a super regionals in Greenville.
Yeah.
What kind of pressure does that put on a team who has never gotten over this hump, and now they have to do it at home? Is that an advantage, a disadvantage? What do you think?
I think it's more of an advantage for them, just because it's a smaller ballpark, 5,500 people, although they have had 7,500 requests for tickets. I mean, Greenville loves their ball, right? Like that. This is a baseball community. Coach Godwin played for ECU. He was a 4-year letterman there. So the entire community is going to be out in left field, hanging over those short half walls. It looks like a little league park in the outfield, at least, but beautiful park overall. Just because I think, Texas is going to come in favored, which is somewhat of a unique situation as a 9 seed. I think some of that pressure is off because of the fact that they did get to this point. Like, they're truly playing with found money at this point. So I don't think the pressure is going to be there. I think the pressure will be there much more so if Texas is able to win game one. At that point, you could definitely see kind of the wheels like get a little shaky and revert back to earlier in the season. But no, I don't think it's out of the question that, Texas could come in and sweep the first two games, but they're a grinded out team. So, they're not going to give up until the last pitch is thrown, the last out is recorded. And so it will be a dogfight for Texas for sure.
Okay. Then let's pick it. Who do you have coming out of the Greenville Super Regional?
Yeah, so I've got Texas coming out of here. As crazy as it sounds, I actually think that the pitching is good enough from Texas and the offense is good enough. I think they win in the first two games, personally.
I'm kind of with
you. I've been watching more and more film from ECU, and I really like some of the pitchers they have, like Spivey and Telwiger, but I don't know that they can keep up just bat after bat after bat against Texas offense. That's been really good all season long.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they pitch Spivey, who's the American Athletic Conference Pitcher of the Year as a reliever, which has never happened before.
And he's also a All-American.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see if he comes in off the bench on like Friday if they need him, or if they're going to hold him and try and pitch him as a starter on Saturday. I'm not sure where we're going to see him, but we're going to see him.
Yeah, you're definitely going to see him. I talked to some folks from ECU earlier this morning, and the way they described it is if ECU has a lead and it's not, like a 6-run lead on Friday night or Friday, I keep Friday night. This is these early day games mess me up, right? But if ECU has a marginal lead on Friday, or if they're within 1 or 2 runs on Friday, they're going to throw Spivey out for sure. If the game is just out of hand one way or the other, Texas or ECU, he will absolutely be the starter on Saturday, according to what the ECU folks are saying. He looks really good. He's a guy that can go and extend out there for 4 or 5 innings. And then, like I said, they've got some other power arms that have come down and closed, like the shortstop, Zach Agnos. He's a really good kid. He plays shortstop every day, but they'll roll him out for 1 inning of 2 innings of work. And it's kind of fun to watch because he'll start off his fastball at 90. And by the end of the inning, he's sitting 94, 95.
Yeah.
Twelwiger has a really good arm on him. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of match everything up. We might see 3 innings from every single one of the pitchers this weekend. Who knows? It's just, they're impossible to chart.
Yeah, it really is. It's an interesting setup they've got going. Their game management is unique. So,
yeah.
Tell you what, we both have Texas. We both predict Texas to win, So, but why don't we take a look at some of the other regionals?
So, starting off with the number 1 overall seed and the potential matchup in Omaha for either ECU or Texas, you have Tennessee versus Notre Dame, and I have Tennessee running away with that one. Notre Dame has a couple of good players and they have some pitching, but I do not see anything from Notre Dame that tells me that they're going to give Tennessee a hard time in the Super Regional.
I mean, Tennessee is Tennessee, and they have been that all season. Granted, Texas did beat them, but Tennessee has been nearly unstoppable all season. But if there's one thing for you Domer fans out there to kind of hang your hat on, they have been hot lately, though. They've been on a road. They had an easier time with that regional than I expected them to have.
That regional is really weird. Texas Tech winning 2-0 over UNCG. Like, what happened to the Texas bats? Did they forget? Did they bring a wooden bat to this game? It was the weirdest thing because there weren't a lot of runs hit in that Georgia Southern regional.
Right. They turned around and only scored 1 run against Notre Dame. So
and Texas Tech looked absolutely awful at the plate. I legitimately I kept seeing the scores and I'm like, maybe they're missing a 1 or it was really strange regional. So yeah, that was a weird one.
But having said that, Notre Dame coasted through it. They didn't struggle at all. So
no,
I'm not expecting them to beat Tennessee, but would it be the shock of the century if they did?
I don't think so. Georgia Tech is a very offensive team, and they give Tennessee all they could handle that game. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say it's the shock of the century by any means, especially considering the last time a number 1 overall seed won the College World Series was 99 with Miami, and it hasn't happened since.
Right.
So,
All right. Well, let's move down the road to College Station.
Yes, our good old friends down the road in A&M, they're playing Louisville. This is one of those ones I feel like could go either way, but when I started digging into the stats, Louisville has been an awful team on the road. And with the, Bluebell Park's going to be just crazy, especially after beating TCU. Schlossnagle has them going. They've got the offense. As much as it pains me, I really don't see Louisville being able to pull the upset here against A&M. A&M would have to just kind of fall off the bandwagon, but they did have a 4-error game against Louisiana. So, anything's possible, but.
I watched quite a bit of the Louisville regional for whatever reason. Yeah. And I didn't actually think they were even going to make it out of the region. In fact, they probably should have lost to Michigan on Monday, because Michigan got robbed with a out call by the umpire, and that should have been
the ump show. There. Oh my gosh, yeah.
But so yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't see A&M going down to Louisville at home.
And it's the craziest thing. Like, they've got Micah Dallas, who we've seen before at Texas Tech, and he's done really well all this season. A&M still has defensive problems. Their bullpen is still, you don't know what to expect, but the fact that they just continue to hit. I feel like that, being at home and being able to hit takes you a long way in a super regional.
Yeah.
And like you said, Louisville was very, very lucky to get out of their own regional, and they've been pretty cold to close out the season. So I don't have great expectations of them, especially looking at their road record.
All right. So we're in agreement we're in agreement across the board. We see Tennessee and Texas A&M going. Now the fourth team in what would be the Omaha bracket would be either OU or Virginia Tech. They play each other in Blacksburg. What about those Sooners?
This is actually outside of Texas, obviously, this is absolutely the must-watch TV of the weekend. You have two of the hottest teams in the nation going at it. Peyton Graham has just been on an absolute tear since the Big 12 tournament. He's much-watched TV every time he comes up. Virginia Tech can destroy a ball. I've gone back and forth so many times. I'm like, I'm going to pick OU. But then I'm like, well, that seems very Homer of me because I've seen them so many times.
Right.
But I keep coming back to, I think I trust OU's pitching, which sounds as crazy as it sounds. I think I trust their pitching more than I trust the unknown pitching of Virginia Tech, because Virginia Tech does not have good pitching. And if we really look at their regional, they weren't tested at all. Wright State didn't show up. They're a huge hitting team. They did nothing. Gonzaga's power arms did absolutely nothing. And it was really, they had to beat Columbia, which, hats off to Ivy League, but they're just not going to be on the ACC level.
Not at the same level at all. That was probably the easiest regional setup out of all of them.
But if I look at the Virginia Tech versus OU, I think it, again, comes down to game one. And if I look at game one, if you're throwing Jake Bennett out there from OU, I got to give OU the nod here. So I'm going to go with OU, but this is a regional or a super regional. I feel like could go absolutely either way. It's purely 50-50 down the middle. So
yeah, I'm kind of with you. OU's pitching has been surprisingly good, and I do think that's probably just enough to get it done. I admit, though, I don't know what kind of home field advantage they have in Blacksburg. They do have very cool tiered terraces with like lawn instead of bleachers in most of the stadium, which is pretty cool. But I don't know that it lends itself to some kind of great home field advantage. I don't know. Maybe we're wrong, but I think OU just pips them too.
I just, Peyton Graham, if it weren't for Ivan Melendez, Peyton Graham would certainly be up there for my Golden. And I think Peyton Graham will be a Golden Spikes finalist. But I just think OU, having been it on Friday night, and they've been hot the past 3 weeks or so. I don't see them losing, but anything's possible. So, and then we head out west. So that's the left side of the bracket. That the way those match up, it would be Tennessee based on our picks, Tennessee, Texas, and then A&M, OU. Talk about a heck of a bracket in Omaha.
Good. Yeah, no kidding. It's going to be much harder to come out of that side of the bracket than the other side. And we'll get to that in a second, but real quick, Peyton Graham is not a Golden Spikes finalist.
Oh, he's not. Okay.
The three finalists are Kevin Parada, the Georgia Tech catcher,
Yeah.
Cooper Jerpy, the Oregon State pitcher, and of course, Ivan Melendez, the Hispanic Titanic, who has to be the runaway favorite for that award.
Yeah. Based on those finalists, if there's a betting line out there, I'm going to go hit the betting line because it's going to be Melendez by a mile. Because, you look at Parada's numbers and they're very, very good, but they're nowhere, they're not Melendez. And Herbie is a great pitcher. Like his year, I watched him a number of times when he started to really take off. And, he's really fun to watch, but in a year like we've seen from Melendez, which has not happened very often, 99.9% of the time it's the hitter that gets it. So yeah,
it's knock on wood, it's going to be Ivan Melendez's award.
Yeah. Just go ahead and mail the award to 30 home run at Field, Texas. Just come on, send it on down.
30 and counting.
30 and counting. That's right.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the other side of the Super Regional, what will be the Omaha bracket, and look at the Super Regional with Connecticut and Stanford.
Yeah,
both teams kind of lucky to get out of their regionals, especially Stanford. This one, crazy as it may seem, could have been played in San Marcos and maybe should have been played in San Marcos.
Yeah. Talk about a game that was probably the game of the tournament, that game 7 between Stanford and Texas State. I know I stayed up all 9 innings. I was glued. I was locked in. I was actually rooting for Texas State. I thought it'd be fun to have Texas State host. I knew that would have been amazing for them. But yeah, talk about heartbreak. You're up 3-1 going into the bottom of the 9th, and you give up back-to-back blast. They had brought in their I think Friday night starter was the one who came in relief. Right. Which, interestingly enough, like I joked afterwards to my wife. I said, like, keep Levi Wells from Texas Tech or from Texas State away from chainsaws. Last year, as a pitcher for Texas Tech, he gets knocked out of the Texas Tech Super Regional by Stanford. In the Stanford Regional, Texas State gets knocked out by Stanford. Like, gosh, that dude hates some trees right now.
No kidding. And you know what? Stanford's been a good team all year.
They won the Pac-12,
solid
Pac-12 championship, tourney champion. I mean,
exactly.
They're very, very, very good.
They're very, very good, but they did just eke out of that regional. Connecticut, on the other hand, was a 3 seed in their regional and took down they took down Maryland in the College Park, Maryland regional. Yeah. Which is a nice win. Certainly an upset for Connecticut. Yeah. But, do you see a 3 seed going all the way across in a regional, going across the country to Palo Alto and taking out Stanford?
Unless the kids from Stanford decide that they'd rather take their finals exams, no, there's no way that UConn is going to upset Stanford. Now, I say that, and UConn has literally proved the doubters wrong and haters wrong every single week and all year. I mean, they've put together an amazing resume for a Big East team. But again, their level of competition and who they beat. And, you look at the College Park Regional in Maryland, it was Maryland, Wake Forest, and Long Island that Connecticut beat. They're not exactly world beaters, and Maryland had them on the ropes. Yeah. And I don't think very much of the Big 12 or Big 10. I've said it numerous times, but no, I would put money down on Stanford to sweep them with ease. So,
well, look, I had no shot of ever getting into Stanford, but I can do this calculus, and I say they're gonna roll.
Yeah. So, no, that was a fun regional to watch, and so I hope there's explosions in Palo Alto. I hope there's a ton of fireworks, and it's just
not literal
barn burner. Yeah, not literal. Just I want a barn burner of a good time, because having an early game with Texas, I'm going to need some good baseball at night to put me to sleep. So.
Well, speaking of barn burners, our next Super Regional features Arkansas versus North Carolina, and Wu Pig Sui had multiple barn burners against Oklahoma State. That was a crazy regional, but they came out of it, and now they had to take on the Tar Heels in Chapel Hill. So what do you see there?
Man, that regional was just absolutely drunk. I actually had picked Grand Canyon to be a really big threat there based on what they had done against Texas Tech and Arizona earlier in the season, and they just completely flopped. I thought Missouri put up a great fight. But Arkansas suddenly figured out how to hit all year long. The big bugaboo about Arkansas is they can't hit the ball. They can't hit the ball. Their offense lets them down again. And then, we've like Oklahoma State, my goodness. Rock Riggio, who's been really good all year long. And, if it weren't for kind of a weird draft over the last 2 years, he probably would be in the minors right now. I mean, he's that special of a talent. But for Oklahoma State to put up 60 runs in essentially 2 days or a day and a half and still lose is just insanity. That game was like every minute you're like, wait, what happened? Oh my goodness. So yeah, we got Arkansas versus UNC. UNC's finished the year off hot. They went from not even being in the tournament to just smoking everyone in the ACC tournament. And, they pretty well dismantled a Georgia team, and VCU really put up a good fight. But this is another one similar to the Vatek Oklahoma regional or super regional. I think anything could happen. Arkansas could go completely cold after such an emotional, draining, just, dig your feet through and drag it out weekend.
And it's been that kind of year for them too. Just dig your feet in and drag it out, and they've done the best they can.
And so coming out of this, I could absolutely see UNC just running away with it. At the same time, I'm going to go with Arkansas. I think Arkansas's got some really good pitching talent. And I think they're going to pull off the upset, and they just continue this magical postseason run. So,
well, see, this is the first time we're disagreeing, and it's not because I'm wearing the Carolina blue.
You got the Carolina blue on. So.
Yeah, it's not that. That was purely coincidental. But I think the fighting Mac Browns are going to dig in, and they're at home. So, I don't know. Arkansas has just been, first off, they don't have good college World Series luck,
Nah.
So, I mean, secondly, they just haven't been on this year. They have struggled. They've fought. They've scraped. They might have enough in the tank. You're right. I think this could go either way, and they might have enough in the tank just to get to Omaha.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna pick the ACC here and go Carolina.
I think that's probably a smart pick. Like I said, I don't like to root against Dave Van Horn. He's a good guy, but he knows how to get him in the postseason and get him hot at the right time. But UNC, I mean, even though they're the 10 seed, I feel like they're the underdog coming into this, even though they're at home for a super regional. It's a really weird dynamic.
Yeah. Well, not all that dissimilar to East Carolina being the underdog at home against.
Yeah, Texas. Absolutely. And then, shout out to the Carolinas and Virginia. So you got Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and East Carolina all hosting within a couple hour radius. That's awesome. So,
and Texas heading back to the Carolinas, albeit the northern variety.
The northern variety, yeah.
Right.
So
but
the winning
they
variety.
did not fare well in the South early in the season. So
they did not.
We'll see if this is a little better.
Yeah.
All right, let's head across the country to the Corvallis region, where the Oregon State Beavers are taking on the Auburn Tigers. Cooper Jerpy, like we mentioned, Golden Spikes Award finalist. He'll be on the mound game one. Is that enough to put him up and ultimately take this series?
This is another one of those, there's going to be a lot of people that just see Oregon State and Connor Herpy, and they're going to be like, yep, I'm taking them. I wouldn't sleep on Auburn. They absolutely decimated the folks in their regional, UCLA, Florida State, and Southeastern Louisiana. I mean, Sony DeSharo was just blasting balls out. The question for me is whether Auburn has the arm power to get past Oregon State. With Connor Herpy on the mound on Friday, you got to give the nod to Oregon State just because he's that good. But does Oregon State have the bats to get past Auburn in game 2 and game 3? I think they do.
Yeah, the answer is they definitely do. They've got Jacob Milton, Wade Meckler, Travis Bazzana, Garrett Forrester. They've got some sticks. In fact, I want to say, and I can look this up here in a second, but as a team, I think their batting is amongst the top in the country. Not quite Texas level good, but it's still, they've got some sticks to go along with Cooper Jerpy and the rest of their staff, which is pretty darn
quite good. Yeah. And the crazy thing about Oregon State is they were missing 2 of their star pitchers for the entire season. One was due to injury. The other one was due to injury, although he's been able to come back in a somewhat limited role.
Jake Finnings, who is just now starting to get
now coming to ramp back up. Yeah.
Exactly. So he should they make it to Omaha, he'll be more in the groove of things by then, you would think.
But, I think this is another regional or a super regional watch. I think Auburn should give them a run for their money, but I do have Oregon State. There was a reason they were number 2 pretty much all season long until they lost to Stanford. So
yeah, I'm picking the Beavs.
Yeah.
All right, our final regional we're going to take a look at is Ole Miss versus Southern Miss, the battle of the misses in Hattiesburg. Ole Miss was on the bubble to even make the tournament.
Yeah.
And then they go through and just destroy the Miami regional and
on the bubble is being very, very nice. There was a lot of pundits saying that Ole Miss had no business making it, but you knew as soon as they made it, they were like, well, shit, these guys are going to go on a run. I mean, it happens every single year. This bubble team gets in that shouldn't, and it's like, oh, we're on. Like, let's go. Let's prove them all wrong.
I think I even said North Carolina State should be in over Ole Miss. And then,
I completely agree with that. And I was 100% behind the Wolfpack, who apparently NCAA hates. So, Tommy White, if you're looking to come hit some home runs, please, Texas.
Another portal guy.
But unfortunately, he's headed to Florida State. So there is that. Mississippi's going to burn to the ground with this regional. These two fan bases hate each other. Ole Miss is going to be pissed about having to go to Hattiesburg. Southern Miss folks are going to be like, why in the world are we being invaded by the frat boys from the old row?
Toddy.
This is going to be an absolute barn burner, not for necessarily the baseball, but just for the fans. I mean, it's going to be crazy.
There will be libations imbued.
There will be a couple of drinks parlayed. Yeah, that's going to be happening. From a baseball standpoint, I actually do like Southern Miss. I think Tanner Hall is going to go out on Friday night and absolutely shove. And I think winning game 1 is just going to put Pete Taylor Park on absolute tilt, and they're just going to go nuts. And so I do have Southern Miss coming through. I think Ole Miss's magical run comes to an end because, to be honest, I don't think very highly of Arizona because they have 0 pitching completely. And Miami's just been on a downward trend for 2.5 weeks now. They did not play ball well to end the season. So I do have Southern Miss winning this one.
I'm with you. I agree all the way. So just to recap for those of you keeping score, on one side of what would be the eventual Omaha bracket, we think it'll be Tennessee versus Texas and Texas A&M versus OU, albeit slightly, which that'll be interesting to have Texas A&M, and OU all in one side of the bracket of Omaha.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just our kind of wishful thinking.
Yeah. TV ratings will skyrocket.
It will be huge. On the other side of the bracket, we're saying Stanford. We're split on Arkansas and North Carolina.
Yep.
But then we both agree Oregon State and Southern Miss coming out of the Super Regional. So there's a lot of exciting baseball ahead. Omaha is going to be, as the kids probably don't say, but I like to think the kids still say it, it's going to be lit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be crazy, especially if you have, you get the fan bases of Tennessee. If Texas makes it, you have the fan base of Texas, which travels really well. If A&M makes it, they're going to be there in droves.
Same with Arkansas.
And if Arkansas makes it, I mean, you're going to have 3 or 4 of, some of the biggest fan bases in the nation.
Right.
So it's going to be crazy.
And fairly easy drives for most of those fans.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the teams, it's, a couple East Coasters and a couple of West Coasters, but everyone else is more South Central. So it'd be a really good time.
Speaking of College World Series, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Women's College World Series.
Yes, indeed.
Texas versus OU for the championship. I don't think I'm crazy enough to say Texas is going to win it because, I mean, we have to face facts. OU is OU in softball for a reason. They are just beyond dominant.
OU is the Tennessee of women's softball right now. Exactly. I was looking at their ERAs the other day and I was like, wait, they've got 4 pitchers that are all like 0.5 ERA. This is insane.
Right.
How are you going to do that?
They're 52-3.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been as good as they are on a program on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
They talk about this being their best team ever, which that's high praise for a team that's hoisted a lot of trophies.
And the crazy thing was, if you look at the Final Four of the Women's College World Series, it was the 3 teams that had beat them. UCLA, Texas, and Oklahoma State. And I was like, well, do you take OU or the field? And I was like, no, you're taking OU all the way. I mean,
in fact, Las Vegas had OU as the betting favorite over the field.
Yeah.
That's how dominant they are.
That's how good they are. Yeah.
But the Horns,
they're hot.
First team ever to make the championship series as an unseeded team.
Absolutely.
Which, you could easily say they shouldn't have been unseeded, but they have proven their mettle and they've gotten hot at the right time.
They've gotten hot at the right time. Mike White, I think the single bird salute, really, that was kind of the genesis of them kicking off and then not being seeded. That's just us against the world. And that's the mentality they've kept. And that's what they've kind of run through. Even when they've been down, they haven't been down. They've just fought back. That crazy double throwing error against Oklahoma State the other night was just insanity. And as much as I would love to say Texas, I think OU takes it probably pretty easily, but I will definitely be tuning in. It'll be a lot of fun to watch. So
OU credits their loss to Texas earlier as being a motivating factor to kick them off into the postseason run. So there
you go.
Anytime OU and Texas play each other in any sport, there's not going to be any love lost, but that's especially true in this one.
And despite all those amazing teams led by Cat Osterman and others, this is the first time Texas ever made the finals for the College World Series. So
right.
And this is the first time Mike White's ever made the finals, even though he had some pretty dominant Oregon teams there for
some phenomenal Oregon teams.
Yeah,
so things have come together well for the Horns.
Special season for sure.
They're playing with found money right now. Right? I mean, there's no pressure. Nobody expects them to win. If they pull off the 1980 Do You Believe in Miracles U.S. Olympic hockey win, then that's awesome. But if they end up losing, they still have had a phenomenal season that they will look back on with pride.
For sure. And that no one expected them to be there because in Arkansas, when they did win, the NCAA had no hats, no banner, no nothing. It was like, oh,
right.
Texas won. Yeah, good job, girls. Hit the bus.
The NCAA gave them another chip on the shoulder.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
all right. Well, is there anything else we're missing?
Not that I can think of. I'm hitting the road and, headed out to Greenville. So I'll be reporting live from the jungle, as they like to call it, LeClaire Stadium. And who knows, maybe we'll do a Twitter space and have everyone jump on board and see how things are going. So.
That would be awesome. Things kick off again, noon Eastern Friday, 11 o'clock Central. So it's gonna, if you're planning to have a few while watching the game, do it wisely because it's still early in the day. You don't want to overdo it.
But that they will in North Carolina. So, well, you can follow play-by-play on orangebloods.com. You can find myself at Zach at the Dish on Twitter. Travis, how can they find you?
It's at Travis Galey on Twitter, and we're both on Orangebloods. I have a column up every Wednesday, including today, and this being Wednesday when we're taping. And Zach has a great preview looking ahead to the Super Regional if you want more in-depth coverage. So be sure to log on and follow us on Orangebloods.
Yeah. Well, Travis, thanks for joining me today. It's great talking with you, and looking forward to some great games this weekend. So,
Me too.
Hokum.